I was hired to guard a door that must never open. It opened. They gave me rules, a stipend, and a silence clause that could bankrupt me twice over if I broke it. None of that matters now, because the only thing keeping me sane is telling you exactly what happened, exactly as it happened. This started as a job listing from a contractor called Latchkey Protective, a name that sounded like a joke until I was standing in front of a matte gray door in a basement with no cell phone reception and a clock that ticked half a beat too slow. They called it Utility 3, as if a label could domesticate it. The frame was bolted into poured concrete. No hinges, no visible clearance, just a recessed handle like something you'd palm on a subway car. The air around it felt refrigerated even in July. My supervisor was a woman named Reyes, polite the way a scalpel is polite. She walked me through the rules without looking at cue cards. Rule 1. Never say the word that describes what doors do when they are not shut. Use synonyms. On this site, we call it the movement. Rule 2. If you hear knocking, count to 7 and start the generator before you even think about checking the camera. Rule 3. If the handle turns between 1 and 4 in the morning, read the phrase on the laminated card exactly as written, in a steady voice, once. If you stutter or improvise, you're done. Rule 4. Never, under any circumstances, look directly into the seam when the movement occurs. There's a convex mirror on the opposite wall for a reason. And Rule 5, which she added after a pause long enough to hear the fluorescence buzz, if someone you love speaks to you from the other side, it isn't them. I signed the paperwork anyway. I needed the money, and I told myself this was theater, some corporate ghost story to keep temps from letting their friends in for a tour at night. My hours were 6 in the evening to 6 in the morning, alone on Sublevel B of a municipal archive nobody thinks about unless they need a birth certificate in a hurry. I had a stool, a desk with a bank of old cameras, a space heater that did nothing, a thermos of coffee, and a door. The first week was easy, if you can call waking up with your jaw clenched easy. I learned the rhythms of the place. The night custodians upstairs played the radio too loud at 10 and went quiet by 11. At 2 the building sighed like it remembered being full, ductwork settling as if with a tired breath. The door did nothing, which was somehow worse than if it had tapped once or twice just to prove it was a door. On night 8, it introduced itself. The generator coughed without being asked, and the lights dimmed to the color of wet nickel. I heard a knock, soft as a fingertip on a window. I counted to 7 because that's what the rules said, even though every nerve in me wanted to sprint and slap the mirror with the flat of my hand like a fire alarm. At 7, the knock came again, not louder, just closer, like it had learned the echo of the hallway and corrected for it. I started the generator, heard the old engine take the load, and the cameras flickered from grayscale to a sickly sort of color. The mirror showed what it always showed. The door, my reflection, the yellow tape line on the floor you are not supposed to cross. But the sound was wrong. It wasn't a knock anymore. It was breath, long and slow, like somebody was trying to fog the seam. At 1 in the morning, the handle twitched. I had the laminated card ready, words I had practiced under my breath, without saying them near the metal. I read them in a steady voice. The handle stopped. I felt foolish and relieved at once, and I said into my radio, stupidly, that the door had almost done the thing it's not allowed to do. The words slipped out the way a stubbed toe curses, automatic and bright. Even before I finished the sentence, I felt the change. The air pulled toward the seam as if the room had suddenly remembered a wind. The fluorescent hum lost its pitch. The clock ticked correctly for exactly 1 second, and then not at all. The handle turned by itself to the halfway point, the sweetest little courtesy, the way a host might gesture at a dining room you are not invited to enter. I looked at the mirror like a good employee. In the reflection, the seam unstitched, a hairline parting, and what lay beyond was not a storage closet. It looked like rain, streetlight rain, the kind that makes whole neighborhoods glow sodium orange. I smelled petrichor and hot asphalt and the electric hint of summer storms, and underneath, something I recognized only because it is the smell of hospital blankets just before dawn. My radio hissed with a voice that was not Reyes asking for a status check. It said my name like my mother did when she wanted me to come home before the streetlights came on. I am not proud of what happened next. I stepped over the yellow tape line to get closer to the mirror, because the part of me that believes you do your job properly wanted clarity, and the other part of me wanted to see her face one more time. The rain beyond the seam brightened like someone had cracked the clouds with their fingers. I saw a figure at the edge of it, just far enough to keep me from making out features, just close enough to feel the idea of them. It lifted a hand, and my body leaned without asking forward. I said her name without sound, lips shaping it like a prayer. The mirror fogged at the edges, silver trembling as if something breathed through it. Rule 5 kicked in a half-second before my voice did. I stepped back, heel scraping the tape, heart clipping along like a sparrow. I read the phrase again, steady, cold, exact, each syllable like a switch thrown. The handle eased, the seam stitched, and the rain smell thinned to dust. Only then did I notice the crescent of moisture on the concrete, a perfect arc like a cheek pressed there. It evaporated while I watched, leaving a salt ring like a teacup. When Reyes did her 2 a.m. round, she saw my scuff over the tape and said nothing for a long time. Then she put a finger to the crescent-stained ghost and said, "Good, you learned why the mirror exists." She handed me a fresh card, the ink slightly different, same words, new emphasis. "Do not improvise," she said, not even with silence. I hadn't told her about the voice, the summer storm smell, the memory it wore to get inside. She must have guessed anyway, because she added a 6th rule without writing it down. "If the thing speaks like you're dead," she said, "answer with your living. Say the name of someone who still buys groceries, still pays rent, still returns calls. It hates the present. It only knows whether that already happened." Outside, the city had that 3 a.m. hospital quiet, parking lots shining like empty plates. Inside, the generator ticked as it cooled, and somewhere a cabinet settled with a hollow, domestic clunk. I finished my shift with the card face up, and the clock rang again. At home, my hallway smelled faintly of rain, although the streets were dry and the forecast promised sun. I slid the bathroom mirror off its nail and propped it on my dresser facing the apartment door. I slept with the light on and dreamed of a cul-de-sac where every house had the same porch swing. In the dream, the swings were moving, but there was no wind. Second week, the movement announced itself with a knock that was also a cough. I counted to 7, but at 5 the handle shook like a cold hand trying keys. I started the generator, read the phrase, and waited for the room to exhale. Instead, the lights dimmed until my reflection looked like a developing photograph. On camera 3, a drop tracked down the seam and hung there like a bead of mercury. When it burst, the microphone picked up a sound I can only describe as thunder translated into breath. My radio crackled with someone asking for help in my own voice. I didn't answer, because I could taste penny metal on my tongue, and I remembered Reyes's 6th rule. Instead I said my sister's name, the living one, 3 times like a lifeline. The sound backed away as if embarrassed, and the handle went still. Later, on my lunch break at 2:30, I found a name carved under the desk lip. Brennan, in block letters, and below it, "Do not breathe the rain." I put my thumb over the warning and felt a groove rubbed smooth by habit. When I asked Reyes who Brennan was, she said, "One of us," then changed the subject to payroll. At home that night, 3 slow knocks tapped my apartment door at exactly 3:33. I looked in the mirror instead of the peephole and saw the hallway stretched as if it were a photograph pulled at both ends. The exit sign bled orange like a sky after rain. Someone whispered my name through the door with my mother's tempo, but the consonants were wrong, too careful, like reading. I said my sister's name again, and the whisper faded like steam. The next shift, the tape line was wet on the far side, droplets lined up like a string of pearls. The camera showed nothing crossing, only empty concrete, and my mouth tasted like rain. Reyes sent me an email with no subject line that read, "If the building alarms go off, pull the main and stay put." She added, "If anyone with a badge tells you otherwise, ask yourself which weather they smell like." That night the alarms did go off, a crawling siren that made your teeth feel loose. Red strobes painted the door like a wound, and the handle twitched in the light. I pulled the main, the siren died, and in the quiet you could hear the seam breathing. The phrase card shook in my hand, and I knew if I said it, the room would hold. Before I could speak, someone pounded up the stairwell and banged on the metal door to Sublevel B. The voice through it said, "City Fire Inspector, open up, evacuate now." I thought of which weather he smelled like, and there it was, clean summer rain, hospital blankets, coin. I read the phrase instead of the latch code, steady, precise, the words biting into the air like teeth. On the other side of the stairwell door, the inspector's fist stopped, and a child laughed softly, wrong pitch for a body. The handle moved to 3/4 and paused, courteous, patient, coaxing. I backed to the mirror, lifted it so the seam filled the curvature, and waited for the rain to blink. It didn't blink, it breathed, slow, and somewhere inside it a lamp flickered in a room I knew. A TV reflected cartoons on the ceiling, and a frame held a school picture with teeth I used to hate. My mother hummed in the kitchen, one note, then another, and the mirror froze me like ice. I remembered the 6th rule and said my sister's name again until the lamp went out. The handle retreated one notch, as if sulking, then began to turn the other way again. Then the clock stopped, once. Then the clock stopped, once. The second hand hung, slid backward, then stalled on the 12th. The handle finished its courteous turn and completed the movement. I did not say the word. I did not breathe. The seam parted like a wet eyelid. Rainlight filled the mirror and ran down it in sheets. The smell hit first, petrichor wrapped around coin and hospital blanket, and my chest tried to take it in. Do not breathe the rain, Brennan had carved. I clamped my jaw and counted my heartbeats and watched the room tilt toward weather. The phrase lived in my mouth. I spoke it with Reyes's new emphasis, clean and flat. For the first time, the words did not stitch. They inverted. In the grammar the stopped clock stole. The seal became an invitation. The rain brightened. Something stepped forward that did not have feet. It was not a person. It was a weather, and it had learned my house. Answer with your living, Reyes had said. The present is poison to it. I said my sister's name, the way she says it on voicemail. I listed her groceries, dish soap, oat milk, cat litter, a lime. I said the bus line she complains about and the number on her mailbox. I said the leak in her ceiling and the rent due this month. I said the time on my phone and the date and the day. The rain hissed. The mirror shook. The thing drew back as if embarrassed by a bright light. The seam kept moving anyway. The door was open then, not a crack but a gap. Darkness edged in amber like a storm scene from under a bridge. Footsteps on the stair. Reyes. She stopped at the tape, eyes on the mirror. She smelled like coffee, printer toner, winter salt, street now, present. Good, she said. We let it move tonight. Pressure builds. If we never give it that, it takes it. She met the weather's edge in the mirror and said the phrase like a surgeon's count. The seam narrowed. Hold it, she said. Anchor. I spoke rent and bus lines and grocery lists until my lungs shook. Inch by inch, the door came home like a line you cannot afford to drop. When the seam kissed itself shut, the room forgot rain. We stood in wrong clock quiet until the mirror cleared. Reyes took the card and wrote one more line in neat block letters. If the clock ever stops twice, leave. At home my hallway smelled like dust. I locked the deadbolt, slid the mirror back on its nail, and sat against the door until sun pushed at the blinds. At 3:33 the next night, the peephole darkened. 3 slow knocks, polite. My phone said Tuesday, and I said it out loud and waited. The door breathed once, shallow, then stopped. If anyone you love speaks through your door, it is not them. If the clock stops twice, leave. I am leaving. Right now.